Okay, it is 7:01, so I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. I've got a few comments. First of all, thank you for joining us this evening. For those who don't know, I'm Jody, the president of BROA, and I wanted to talk to you about a couple different things. First of all, I'd like to thank our host, Paul, for doing this. And we've had a lot of calls coming over the tenant helpline regarding the 60-day notices. There's one for if you're going to be moving in or if you are going to be selling your property. Both require that there be a legal affidavit, which means you're agreeing to what you're saying is truthful and you are signing that document under penalty of perjury. So it is a serious legal document. And we had a gentleman call one of the board members the other day and was quite irate that he had spent the money to join BROA and we were not going to help him fill out that form. That is not our job. We are not attorneys, and so I want to make that very clear. These are serious documents. It's a convoluted situation to deal with. We have two attorneys that are part of our membership, and so I would refer you to your newsletter for their numbers. They are all experienced in tenant landlord law and the evictions process, so please consult an attorney if you're going to use those 60-day notices. They will help you fill them out properly and make sure that they are served properly so that you don't lose time in having to start the process over. So please consult your legal attorneys. And okay, so in case you are not aware, Governor Inslee and the State Attorney General are being sued by WLA, doing business as the Washington Apartment Association, and they have joined with the Washington Business Property Association to bring a lawsuit for their related to the moratorium on evictions. And there's also one going against the CDC. I don't know if Washington will be joining that or not, but for the overreach. So WLA raised $20,000 in order to get in on this lawsuit. And I believe a quarter of that was contributed from BROA. So mid-December, the membership renewal notices will be going out to everyone. And part of that will include a request for PAC donations, which is the Political Action Committee, and that goes to fund our lobbyists, or the Legal Defense Fund, and that is simply to deal with situations like this. Legal lawsuits are not cheap to conduct. We anticipate, but probably more funding will be necessary to continue this. They bypassed the Washington State Supreme Court and have gone directly to the federal level to try to get some satisfaction and relief from the governor's overreaching broad moratoriums and endless, no end in sight. So when you see your renewal notices, if you would please strongly consider continuing to contribute to the Legal Defense Fund. You can, because of the financial rules, they have to be separate checks. So the PAC is on one check, your membership renewal is on a separate check, and then the Legal Defense Fund, any contribution you choose to make would be another separate check. Or you can go directly to the WLA website and give online that way. Just indicate that it is for the Legal Defense Fund. So with that, I'm going to post. I'm going to share, see if I can do that. Paul, would you activate that? I've got that website link for that Legal Defense Fund. Let's see if I can do that. There. So if you guys need to take that down, there's the link to go ahead and contribute to that Legal Defense Fund directly through the WLA screen website. Okay, so moving on. There's a perpetual debate about, Section 8 housing vouchers, that kind of thing. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, we have Lona Hammer and a fellow coworker from Kennewick Housing Authority, and they are going to present the ins and outs of the program, what it looks like, some additional housing vouchers beyond Section 8 that you might be familiar with hearing about. They're going to talk about just all kinds of things. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Lona. This is a presentation that is very appropriate at this time.
All right, here we go. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's out there staying healthy. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with you. My name is Lona Hammer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. Amanda Taylor, Kennewick Housing Authority's Housing Choice Voucher Supervisor, and our Compliance Director is with me. Say hi, Amanda.
Hi.
And we are here and socially distanced and bringing you this presentation. This is our first presentation, so please humor us. We're not used to this, and it's bad enough just to get on and be a participant listening in rather than being a presenter. Amanda is our Section 8 program guru, and she's undoubtedly the most knowledgeable person in the room on this program. She will undoubtedly correct me if I misspeak. Humor me though, I'm a 50,000 foot level gal. For this session, we won't be talking about our authority-owned properties or about our other programs we administer as a local landlord or our other housing assistance programs we manage. If you want to know about those, just contact me and I'll be happy to sit and talk to you ad nauseum about all of our programs. But instead, I kind of want to focus just on the Section 8 program and how it may be of benefit to you. The Section 8 program was renamed the Housing Choice Voucher Program over a decade or so ago. I was still in Alaska in public housing then, so I know it was a long time ago. The terms Section 8 and Housing Choice Voucher are the same programs, and these terms are used interchangeably, even though they've changed. The initial how we have to operate, because sometimes I know folks say, well, why can't you do this? Why can't you change this? This is so frustrating. This doesn't make any sense. I get that, and we have heard that. In the beginning, there's Congress who provides us statutory guidance and funding for a myriad of HUD programs, including Section 8. The guidance within the statute cannot be changed except by Congress. It doesn't have to make sense. You have to follow the rules until Congress changes. And we learned that with the NSP program. And there were some really arduous rules that didn't make any sense, but we had to follow them until they changed them. The guidance within statute can't be changed except by Congress. HUD then drafts regulations based on the statutes by Congress for those rental assistance programs, and agencies are awarded funding by formula, or we apply competitively or non-competitively for assistance for these programs. Statutory rules are published in the Federal Register, and then HUD publishes program regs in the Code of Federal Regulations. And unfortunately for us, and for you, if you're a Section 8 landlord, there are reams and reams and reams and reams of guidance that we have through notices, guidebooks, and other instruments, which housing authorities utilize then to draft our own policies and procedures for our individual housing authority, which might be different than Pasco Housing Authority, just across the river. For us, our guiding guidance is our Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan. Just so you guys know, all of the musts that are found in statute, and in regulation, those are musts. We must do that. We can't change that. If there's a may in regulation, we have an ability to perhaps set our own guidance subject to following what's published and the leeway that they give us within that regulation. We can also at times ask for a waiver of some portions of a regulation. Sort of is a long, arduous process that takes a long time, but we have done that. Right now, HUD has issued a number of waivers we can use because of the COVID pandemic, and we have made ample use of those, and those are posted on our website if anybody's interested. We're also required to follow all guidance up and down the chain, and sometimes we can't always honor a request for a change by a landlord if it's basically above our link in the chain. Kind of like if you were a housing specialist and needed to run something by a regional manager, get permission from an owner, and they just had set the rule for everybody, and that was where it is. You know, and sometimes, as I said, doesn't make good sense, but it doesn't matter. We have to follow those HUD regulations. Voucher where the participant can use their voucher at an eligible location, and a project-based voucher, which is assigned to a specific unit or property via a contract between a willing owner and the housing authority. We have both in our portfolio. Participants can port, for example, take that tenant-based rental voucher to any housing authority at any location in the nation or territory where there's a housing authority. I mean, they could go to New York with that voucher. They can go to San Francisco. They can also go to King County, which is where we see a lot of our vouchers go. And then that housing authority has the choice whether they will absorb that voucher and pay for it with their money, or whether they will administer that voucher and pay for it with our money. Typically what we see is many housing authorities don't absorb those vouchers, leaving us to pay an increased housing assistance payment for that same participant to live in King County, which is twice the amount of a voucher if they were living here. Does it make good sense to me and a lot of other housing authority directors, but that's the rule and that's the program. We can only refuse to pay those vouchers if we are in shortfall and don't have enough money to pay. So that's the one caveat there. You know, at that point in time, we beg the housing authority that's administering the voucher to please, please, please absorb. But sometimes they do, sometimes they won't. So kind of a little glitch on that program. Individuals also have to be in good standing to port that voucher to a different housing authority. A participant on the project-based voucher program has no right to move their voucher, but they can ask to be issued a tenant-based voucher if we are issuing vouchers after 1 year of residence in good standing. Yeah, plenty of regulations here to remember, and there's always little bitty glitches there that we have to chase. Our Section 8 program has many facets. Kind of think of it as a bit of a gemstone. We administer just over 1,050 vouchers currently. We place almost $500,000 into the hands of landlords in our community every month across both Benton and Franklin County, because we have an agreement with Pasco that that vouchers can be placed from our housing authority and their housing authority anywhere that we administer the program in Benton or Franklin County. Makes it easier, makes it really good. But think of that, almost $500,000 a month. We are a tiny economic engine within our community. We're really proud of that. The Section 8 program has a bad name. I think a few tenants give it a bad name, but there are hundreds of tenants who are really good, responsible tenants. I encourage you to look at the good of the program, not the bad. I'll give you an example of some of our special programs within the regular Section 8 program, and it's alphabet soup. We have a non-elderly disabled program, also known as the NED program, which serves non-elderly disabled persons only, 62 and under. We have multiple mainstream programs. However, we don't have a cute acronym yet for that program, in which we serve non-elderly disabled persons who are homeless and or in danger of homelessness, age 62 and under. Earlier this week, we received an award of 40 mainstream vouchers for which we will begin issuing vouchers in January. That equates to just $300,000 of rental assistance for the year that will go into the pockets of landlords who are willing to rent to these participants. We also have a Veterans Administrative Supported Housing Program. It's called VASH, that serves homeless veterans. This program is a collaborative partnership between VA and the Housing Authority, and VA selects participants and provides case management assistance to assist the veterans in maintaining their housing. That isn't the only VA program that does housing, but that's the only one we're involved with. We do active meetings with the VASH folks and with our sister housing authority across the river on this program. We also have a family unification program that we call FUP, FUP, which requires a referral from DSHS for a family who's reunifying via the courts or DSHS. We also have an HCV homeownership program, which allows an eligible family to utilize their voucher assistance for homeownership. The families must be working and meet a specific income requirement unless they are permanently disabled. And they also must be in compliance with all aspects of their family obligations and have credit and sufficient debit income ratios to qualify for a home loan, take homeownership classes, and secure a mortgage commitment independent KHA. They have to go out and qualify for a loan just like you and me. The housing assistance is used as a direct offset of a portion of their payment or grossed up and calculated as an additional income for the participants, depending upon which calculation the bank decides to use. We'd prefer them to use it as a direct offset, but we have no ability to make that decision. That's a bank determination. For me, this is one of the most exciting programs that we have in our portfolio because it builds wealth and stability in families. And we often see them going off program and being totally self-sufficient. And they begin to pay property taxes as soon as they buy that home with their first mortgage payment. So, I mean, it really does help within our community and stabilize families and build wealth in families. We also have a family self-sufficiency, also known as the FSS program, which allows families to build escrow as their income rises to meet goals such as furthering education via college or vocational school, purchasing a home, or secure employment to meet employment goals. This program is typically a 5-year program, and to graduate and receive an escrow check, the participant must be off all TANF for welfare assistance for a year. Right now, the regular voucher program waiting list is closed, but the special programs are still open. The Section 8 waiting list can sometimes take well over 2 years to reach the top of the list. So this is a very popular program, and the need for our program far outweighs the resources for these programs. I suspect that will continue to remain the case for many, many years to come. We're hopeful that we'll see additional program dollars. It looks like in the current administration's budget, there was a small increase for this particular program in the budget. Just so you know, there are limits on the amount of rent that can be subsidized. And kind of our starting point is with the HUD fair market rents, FMRs for short. Again, there's a lot of alphabet soup here. And we are required to set payment standards, which are between 90 to 100% of that fair market rent to be in compliance with HUD. If our payment standards drop above or go or below, then we're out of compliance and have to adjust within 3 months. As of January 1st of 2021, our payment standards will be set at 105% of fair market rent for all bedroom sizes. The FMRs for our area, unfortunately, took a substantial nosedive this year, much to our dismay. We did try to challenge that, did go to our Region 10 administrator, and they were setting it based on what they thought the economy was going to do in the next 12 months. And they indicated that for us to even try to change that, we would have to to pay for a large 100 landlord survey with no indication that we would be successful in getting those overturned. So we've kind of accepted that. For landlords who have current tenants in residence, this won't be applicable to you, as you're held harmless with the current rents. But for those who are leasing up with new, the top amount that someone can lease up, it's going to be lower. So, and just so you know, if your rents are set at or below the payment standard, you're in pretty good shape to rent to a Section 8 participant. And if you have a family with significant income, that family might be able to rent above the payment standard. HUD requires families to pay the higher of 10% of gross income, 30% of adjusted gross income, or they can pay up to 40% of adjusted income for their portion of rent, but not a penny more. What they can pay on the maximum end depends on what their income is. And yeah, it's kind of complicated. Amanda will talk a bit about the payment standards, and we do a worksheet that's called How Can I Afford That Unit, that we give to the tenants, so that gives them the range of acceptable rents, hopefully making it easier for everybody. In terms of that 40% scenario, the tenant pays that last 10%. We pay the amount on the 30%, but if they decide to rent above that payment standard, then that's 100% the tenant's responsibility. Every tenant has a housing specialist who calculates the rent, who works with each participant, who can work with landlords, answer questions. Their caseloads are well over 200 persons. And we receive a high volume of calls, sometimes over 50 or 75 calls can happen in a day. So if you're calling, please be patient, and they'll get to you and answer your question. If they don't, call me. For all participants, we do a background check. That said, I think you need to do your own background checks. We don't check credit or public records. We really look for distribution, cooking of methamphetamines. We look for sex offenses, but we don't and we look for felonies within 3 years that are not related to traffic. And we use that to screen out. We look for everyone that we screen. We look at individually based on the HUD guidance about someone's adjudication, and we look at those separately. Every tenant has an ability to grieve that if we turn them down, and any kind of adverse action, tenants are able to grieve the actions that we take that are adverse. You alone get to decide who you house. That said, the state of Washington has passed law, maybe it's about 18 months ago, that makes it illegal to deny an otherwise acceptable tenant just because a portion of their rent is going to be paid by some type of rental assistance. That includes other types, through home or through the Benton Franklin Human Services, or anyone. I encourage all landlords to have standards for who's an acceptable renter, and have them written down and follow your standards, so that no one can ever come at you and say, wow, you discriminated against me. The fair housing testers are out there, and they likely still are, even with the pandemic. And I'm always ever wary of those folks being out there and really testing folks to see if they're discriminating. We also have an occupancy standard, and we pay a participant subsidy based on that standard, not on the demographics of the family and whether they have a boy and a girl that are teenagers or they have grandma living with them. We pay the subsidy based on the minimum HUD standard. That occupancy standard is 2 heartbeats per bedroom. A living room, if a family and a landlord agree, can be considered an additional sleeping room, but we don't pay additional subsidy on that living room space. So a 4-person family that qualifies for a 2-bedroom subsidy can rent a 3 or 4 bedroom unit if the price of that unit falls at or below the can I afford this unit calculation. Using this occupancy standard allows HA to maximize the families we serve. And that's the minimum HUD standard. On a case-by-case basis, as a reasonable accommodation, we can provide additional subsidy for persons with permanent disabilities. And I know you're saying, where's the beef? That I've been talking for 10 minutes. How does this program help me and my tenants? Well, let me give you a real life example. With COVID-19, all of our landlords on the Section 8 program were somewhat protected from harm. The tenants who experienced a drop or lack of income picked up a change of circumstance form outside our building, and an interim reexamination of income was completed by their housing specialist, and the tenant's portion of the rent adjusted down to an affordable amount. If the family's 2 breadwinners, for instance, had no income, their portion of the rent would be set at $50. Your tenants without assistance don't have access to this type of program. Please note, though, that Benton Franklin County, the City of Richland, and Community Action Connections are all administering emergency rental assistance programs. So I would suggest providing your tenants that information on resources so they can access, so that they can get you paid your rent. If you have Section 8 tenants who have refused to pay their portion, called the total tenant payment, or TTP for short, we want to know, is this act places that family in bad standing on our family obligations? And we can also encourage them at that point in time to apply for emergency assistance to get their portion of the rent paid. I think there are programs out there, and if we all work together to keep everybody whole. The landlord mitigation program through the Department of Commerce also can assist if you have a tenant that is on any type of housing assistance, not only our housing assistance. And they can pay for some of the damages that someone would do to a unit up to $5,000. This program is dependent on funding through the state legislature, and I don't know what the status of that funding is for this year. So I want to see starts how much money they actually allocate to this program this year. And if you have claims, make sure that you watch how this goes through the legislature and apply for that funding when it's available. For the bad Section 8 tenant horror story you hear, there are hundreds of very responsible Section 8 tenants paying their rent, going to work every day. That one tenant you hear about can spoil it for so many people, and that's what gives the program a bad name. 20-some years ago, I was the landlord, just like you, and I had a Section 8 tenant. She was fine. She was good. And the program really helped this individual to move forward into full self-sufficiency in a couple of years. And you say, how about money? How do we get our money if we're going to do this program? And what's the logistics around that? Receiving that housing assistance payment, or we call it HAP. I think they should have called it HAPPY. Once you're set up in the system, HUD issues us funding for a housing assistance payment, and then checks are issued around the first business day of the month. HAP checks are deposited directly into a landlord's bank account rather than mailed. That said, if there's a change of ownership, we need to know right away so we can get the appropriate paperwork executed and change our paperwork, because we can't pay a non-owner. What about inspections? Well, we'll have Amanda talk about inspections and our alternate inspection protocol in this time in a few minutes. Actually, let's have Amanda take it away for a little bit, and I'll put on my mask here and let her talk to you about the nuts and bolts of the Section 8 program. Then we can answer some questions. Okay, hold on. Let me slide this over to Amanda.
Hi. So I will tell you how the HAP and the TTP is calculated. And so to calculate out the tenant's rent, we take their annual income minus any deductions. So for children, if they're disabled, elderly, then minus any medical expenses or childcare expenses. And then we will subtract that from the annual income and then divide that out by the monthly. And then take 10% of that. And then that will give us their monthly. And then we will do adjusted monthly, and that will give us the TTP. And then for the HAP, we can't actually determine the HAP until they have actually found a unit. So once they find the unit that they're looking for and we know the rent, and then the what utilities the client is going to be responsible for, we'll know the gross rent, and then we can calculate out what the subsidy will be. But the HAP cannot exceed the maximum subsidy. So it will be the HAP is either going to be the payment standard for the family minus the TTP, or the gross rent minus the TTP. But when the family goes to you, they will have a "can I afford the unit" form, which will tell you all of that information. And because we break it down for the tenant, and it will have everything. It will have the payment standard that they qualify for. It will have their monthly income, their monthly adjusted income. It will have the max subsidy that we will pay for the client, and it will have the max gross rent. And so it has all of that broken down for you and the client. And then, so it's pretty specific on the form that we have. And then, so like, for example, if the client has a payment standard of a 2-bedroom, it'll say 1143, and then it'll say what the total, what the TTP is. For example, like one that I have right here says 528, and then it'll say the monthly income is 179, and 30% of the adjusted is 528. And then the gross rent is, we have utility allowances that we have done by a company every year. So based on if the unit is a house or a duplex or a mobile home or an apartment, and then if the tenant is responsible for all utilities or just electric, we will calculate that out based on who's responsible for what utilities, and we will add that to the rent. So that plus the rent is going to be the gross rent. And then that can't go over whatever the client's maximum allowable gross rent is on the "can I afford the unit" that they will have. The request for tenancy approval process. So once, if you have a client that comes to you and says, "Will you accept Section 8?" You have gone through your screening process, you decide that you've approved them, you're going to rent to them. You will fill out the request for tenancy approval. It'll have when the unit's available for inspection, the bedroom size, who's responsible for what utilities. You both will sign it. And then it'll have, if you've never been a landlord for us before, it'll have deposit and banking information that would need to be turned in. If you're not comfortable giving the client that information, you can always email it to the housing specialist or directly to accounting, because some landlords aren't obviously comfortable giving that to them. And then that would get turned in. Once that RFTA is turned in, we have 15 days from the day that it's turned in to get the inspection scheduled. Right now, due to COVID, we have a alternate inspection. We have a certification that indicates that you're certifying that there's no life-threatening deficiencies in the unit. And we can do that in place of the initial inspection, because we're obviously not going into any units that have that are occupied at this time. If it's a vacant unit, we will go out and do the inspection if we can, but otherwise we can do that alternate inspection. So for the inspections, we're looking for any health or safety issues, making sure that the units have smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, the windows lock that are supposed to lock, doors lock that are supposed to lock, the refrigerators, the stove, that sort of thing are working. No infestations, just tripping hazards, just general health and safety. And if you like, I can give you my email at the end, and I can always send you one of our inspection books, and it just goes through and tells you kind of what we look for. Let's see, and then at the lease up, you will sign a landlord certification, just kind of saying that it's gone through the HQS process and it's passed. The utility allowance, on the RFTA, you will mark who is responsible for what utilities, and you'll mark whether they're gas, electric, natural gas, because when we do we have to do a rent reasonable for the unit to make sure that the rent that's being asked isn't more than an unassisted unit. And then currently, we're not going to put into effect any new utility allowances due to the moratorium that's currently in effect. And then one of the biggest issues that we have with landlords is that when they have problems with a client, is that they don't notify us. So when they start having problems with a client, if you notify us, that way we can kind of if we need to, we can contact them by letter to say, hey, we know that this is happening, you need to get back into compliance. Because if we know when it starts to happen, we can kind of sometimes help the tenant get back into compliance, because otherwise sometimes we have issues that there's been all these things going on for a while and then we're not notified, and then sometimes the landlord wants us to go and do something then, but we haven't been notified, so we're kind of clueless at that point that there's nothing we can do because it's been going on for so long, and there's just nothing that we can do because we haven't known about it, and it's been going on for maybe a year or year and a half, and we're just now being told. And let's see what else. And we do have a landlord listing, so that when we have clients looking, that we give them in our briefing packets to contact for that they can call when there are units available. We also have a landlord book, which they actually don't have access to, but there is the list that they do have access to. And
Landlord briefing.
Oh, we do have a landlord briefing packet and it kind of goes over everything. It has the current payment standards. It has a flow chart on how everything works. It has sample forms. It has the sample RFTA. It has what our voucher looks like. It has the HAP contract. It actually has the inspection book. It has sample forms of everything that you would sign at the lease up and everything as well. And we keep and I believe it has the utility allowances and everything in there as well. Anything else?
No.
I can't think.
Any questions?
I don't know how to work this.
Hi, guys.
I don't know how to work it.
Hi,
So.
guys. We're trying to socially distance here
Sorry.
and behave. If anybody has any questions, please unmute yourself and ask any questions. This is kind of a flyover view of the program, and we're here to answer any questions if you have questions. Yeah, and just let us know. We'd love to have new landlords. If you're not sure, we certainly can send you a briefing package. You can take a look at it. You know, rent to a Section 8 voucher holder and you decide you don't like it, once that voucher holder, you're not bound to this by anything. And just to let you know, the housing assistance payments contract is between you and KHA. Your lease is between you and your tenant. There is no three-way agreement here. So that allows you to do what you need to do, with your lease and with your tenant. We ask that if you do issue comply or vacates, which we can't do right now, but if you issue them in the future, hopefully the moratorium will go away soon. We would like to get a copy of those because that puts them out of compliance with our program. And sometimes it can be real leverage for us to say, you're going to lose your housing assistance if you don't come back into compliance. And that can help you turn a tenant who's going the wrong way, maybe to being a pretty good tenant. So that really is a way that can help you guys. And if it's a bad tenant and they continue doing that, we don't reissue a voucher for that tenant. And that allows us to provide a voucher to a different tenant who's going to follow the rules, because we want everybody to follow the rules. We want everybody not to house individuals who are not on that Section 8 contract. We don't want people to cheat on their income and not report all their income. And we're very aggressive on chasing fraud and recouping fraud of overpaid subsidy because people didn't promptly report income changes. And there is a HUD enterprise verification system on income. And we do utilize that. The system is not perfect. It takes a couple of years, but if that catches up and we find an income discrepancy, we are required to investigate that income discrepancy and chase down the reason why. And if it's because they didn't report income, we do move forward on that. And they either enter into a repayment agreement or it does eventually would go to collections if they refuse to re-enter a payment agreement. We cannot gift these public funds to individuals who have misrepresented their income. So
Lona, I have a question. If someone misrepresents their income and you investigate, could they be kicked out of the program and then the landlord be left holding the bag with now a tenant that is no longer getting subsidized but can't afford the landlord's rent?
They could.
Is the landlord involved in the process of your negotiation so that, or you asked us to, if we know something's going on, to let you know as the housing authority? Does the housing authority also reciprocate and keep the landlord in the loop, or just one day we find out that, oh, we didn't receive the monthly rent payment because for some reason the person got kicked out of the program and the landlord wasn't notified?
We give notice.
How much notice do you give?
We try to we give probably 30 days or more.
Okay. And if I recall, the initial contract is for a year, correct? And then
Correct.
can be renewed for a month or go to a month to month at that point?
Correct.
Okay.
And with those tenants, Jody, we really try to get them on repayment agreements so that that they can make that up. We do really simple terms, no interest. We do everything we can to keep them housed and on program because that's what we're supposed to do. But if you have somebody who's done it multiple times, and sometimes it's necessary to terminate someone when there's real multiple incidents of fraud that come up again and again and they refuse to report income, that would cause someone to get kicked off program. There is, when you have somebody who's underreporting income, they sometimes we find they shouldn't have been on program in the first place, so they can afford their rent. They just don't want to pay it, and would those instances that people are truly defrauding the program, they can afford to pay the rent that they have without assistance. They're taking rental assistance from needy families who are willing to follow the rules. And that, I think, is something that is really unfortunate, but that does occasionally happen.
And then, so as a landlord, we can require renter's insurance, charge the application fee, all of that, just like we would any other normal tenant or
Yeah,
applicant.
we don't tell you how to run your program. We provide housing assistance, and you're the landlord.
So, but I guess what I'm asking, would their renter's insurance be included in part of their cost of the subsidy? And so would
No.
that reduce the amount? Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
And we cannot pay deposits, although community agencies such as Community Action Connections and local churches can help pay those deposits. And if you have a larger deposit because somebody that you use credit as one of your criteria to screen people, and they have a bigger deposit, we don't have any say on that. That's your business practice. I encourage you to do the same thing for one, what you do for all, just to keep you in compliance with fair housing.
Right. So we don't discriminate.
And one thing is like because a lot of places are going to like water, sewer, garbage fees, and because we can't pay fees, so you would have to maybe it's a $30 fee. You would have to have that added to the rent because we can't pay that and then separate it out. So like if the rent was, say, for instance, $750, charge the tenant $780, and then separate it out, distribute it out, however you needed to distribute it out, but so that the tenant is still being charged that fee, but because we can't pay fees for Section 8, the tenant is still being charged that, but it's not being charged as a fee.
It's part of the rent.
It's part of the rent
Sure.
instead.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's one of those little glitches that doesn't quite make sense, but it's it's the rule.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? If you want to use the little chat box at the bottom of your screen, type them in and or unmute yourself and you can ask.
I have a question. I believe I heard you say that there's a little over 1,000 vouchers currently out, but there's a 2-year waiting list. How do those relate to each other? Is that our capacity in the Tri-Cities we only have enough funding for 1,050 housing vouchers, but we have a whole ton of people looking for help?
You basically got it right. That 1,050 is, we had, when I came here, a 975 voucher allocation for us. We've since got a few tenant protection vouchers. We've got some mainstream vouchers. We just recently got 40 mainstream vouchers in addition to the 20 we already have. And we've got recent allocation of 20 VASH vouchers. And so it's what HUD decides to give us. Some of these we apply for vouchers to get them. I had to apply for the 40, but it was a non-competitive award. We had to apply for 16 and do this huge application through grants.gov to get 16 of the same kind of vouchers. I said, didn't make much sense, but it was just the times. We got 4 vouchers for doing nothing just because of the CARES Act dollars, and they put 4 mainstream vouchers in that package and that was something Congress did. So it's like we're never really sure. We just watch what comes out, and I apply for as many different HUD programs and subsidy as we can to bring to our community. And I also do that in the development side, and we try to develop as many units of additional housing. And you have to be assertive and aggressive and really look at how all of the different kinds of programs can fit together, both the state and federal programs. So, and Pasco has a little over 300 Housing Choice Vouchers. They just recently also got 20 VASH vouchers. And I'm unaware if they applied for mainstream or not. So they have vouchers as well that serve Franklin County. And for the tenant-based portion of vouchers, the participants can lease up either in Benton or Franklin County because we have an agreement that specifically states that. So.
Could
does
you
that answer
remind
your
us?
question?
Could you-
And
What was
the need far outweighs the amount of money that we receive, and that's true across the nation. I think Seattle Housing Authority will tell you their waiting list is 10 years long. That's pretty shocking to me. I think they opened their list for an hour and got like 17,000 applicants or something. Boy, for me, I can't wrap my head around those kind of numbers. But yeah, I think the program is underfunded. There's so many people in need. And
Lona, we've got a question. It says HUD-led abatement rules are more stringent. Are there other rules that HUD or other agencies have with housing tenants that impact the landlord?
you want to take that one?
No, not that I can think of right off the top of my head.
Not that we can think of off the top of our head. The housing quality standards inspection, that would be something for landlords to take a look at with their properties. I know in Alaska there, I had a property that someone wanted to live in and it didn't have ventilation in a bathroom. There was no fan, there was no window, and it just didn't pass HQS. So there are some HQS if you would have a really, really old property. Or if you would have a lot of peeling paint and it was built pre-1978, that might be a really hard problem to solve unless you encapsulate all of that lead-based paint and that there's no peeling paint anywhere, or you've had an abatement process done.
I don't really have a lot with the peeling paint.
But we don't see, Amanda also does inspections and she didn't see a lot of that. Here, go ahead.
I mean, I might see a little bit with like the peeling paint issue here. It's not enough for our, what it says on our HQS to warrant anything. So it hasn't really been an issue like for the lead-based paint stuff here. So I can't think of too much. When the carbon monoxide detectors came down, I had a lot of landlords that didn't want to do that, but other than that, I haven't had too many issues.
Any other questions?
So one takeaway would be is that we still on the line to do our own screening and running the program. This is purely just housing assistance, and the tenants has to qualify both their income and what they're allowed to pay within your system. But the landlord still needs to go out and do their due diligence as well.
Correct. You need to do your due diligence. What we do is qualify someone for the program. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to qualify to live in your property. If you have different credit requirements or different criminal background check requirements, as I said before, I encourage you guys to do what you do for one, do for all. You know, and we don't have any, we didn't get involved in that. That's your decision. And we would love to have you as a landlord, but you alone get to pick your tenant. and you alone draft your own leases. You know, you need to be legal with those leases, obviously, but we don't tell you what you need to put in that lease. You just need to be willing to sign that housing assistance contract and rent to that person a year. If in fact you find after 6 months there are serious lease violations, you know, you alone get to make that determination to evict them, assuming the moratorium is gone. You know, it's your choice. What we will do is provide an individual with that request for tenancy approval. They will bring it to you. You will look at that and determine what utilities you pay, what utilities they pay, your willingness to rent to them. And then they'll bring that back to us, probably right now, drop it in our Dropbox. And if it fits within that, can I afford the unit amount, then we would inspect the unit or do the alternate certification for inspection, and then enter your paperwork into the system as a Section 8 landlord and pay HAP on that. And once the certification is signed or the inspection passes inspection, we're eligible to pay housing assistance on that. I encourage you not to sign a lease with a Section 8 participant until the inspection is done, because we can't pay HAP if we don't have the inspection or the certification. I mean, that's an important piece. And you want to make sure that we've looked at that, can I afford the unit? Because sometimes you'll have a client who just says, I want that unit, and they'll sign up for it and they'll tell you they want it and they can't afford it.
Yep.
You want to make sure that, and they may not show you that, can I afford the unit? So you kind of want to wait, or you definitely want to wait, so that it doesn't put you in a position of signing a lease with a tenant on a unit that's not affordable, because at that juncture, we can't pay HAP on that unaffordable unit. And that's something to always kind of keep in mind. Or if it were a unit that wouldn't pass the rent reasonable test, that the rent is comparable with an unassisted unit in the community. So
we have a question.
little
Are
pieces
rates-
there that are, you know, something that landlords need to think about.
Okay. We have a question. Are the rents of what housing considers market rent published somewhere? Or is it?
We use our payment standards, and those will be on our website. And I think our current payment standards are on our website, and our new payment standards, which are about $75 lower than the current payment standards, will be on the website before January 1st.
So Lona, if you said rent payments usually come out about the 1st of the month. So if a tenant moves in on the 15th of the month, say, do we have to wait until the next month to receive payment, or do you issue a half payment for a part of a month, or how does that work?
Accounting will issue payments on the 1st and the 15th.
Okay.
So we do payments twice a month.
Okay. So
and then also, I wanted to let you guys know that if you if a tenant takes you a can I afford the unit form, if you ask, say that a tenant has to make 2 times the rental amount, they would have to make 2 times their adjusted monthly income amount. If so, like, say for example that your rent was $1,000, so they had to make the 2, and then like on their adjusted monthly income is like 600, so then they would have to make the 1,200. They would have to make 1,200 based on their can I afford the unit form. But if you had a question, you could call any of the housing specialists, and we could help you. If you had an applicant and you weren't sure, you could call us. You could call us, and we could go over that with you. If for the applicant, if that was applying or whatnot.
Okay.
And only from personal experience, I recommend that if you have someone that's this usually happens to new landlords that aren't part of our organization, but I have a family member that decided to try the Section 8 housing as their first introduction into this, and the person was not very honest, and that should, for most landlords, that should be a trigger right away that, hey, they're not being honest about what they can actually afford. And so when they went to go sign the paperwork, the amounts were different than what they had said, and I guess they never gave them the what I can afford form because they weren't aware of the whole process. So it's important for landlords to just be really aware of how this works before they get into it.
That's one of the questions in the chat box. How do I ensure I get to see the can I afford the rent form? Who fills
Every
this form out? And does it come from you or does it come from the applicant?
So every applicant or every client is given a can I afford the unit form, and it's typed in, and it has a date, tenant name, voucher number, and completed by, and it's all typed in, and it's completed by the housing specialist. Every client or applicant will have one done by their housing specialist, and it will have their voucher number on it, and it will have the date that it was completed by their housing specialist.
Okay, so as part of the application process, a landlord should ask to see that.
Yes, and it will have, you can also ask to see their voucher, which will be signed by them and their housing specialist, and it will have a voucher number. It will have their voucher issuance and expiration date.
Okay. All right. So if anybody wants a informational briefing package, down in the chat box, there's Lona's email address for the Housing Authority, lhammer@kennewickhousingauthority.org. So if you would like to request one of those, just email her. Are there any other questions from anyone?
Amanda
yes,
is also a Taylor at that same address. So,
okay.
Yeah, one question. Are there certain size units that are in higher demand from the Group 8 vouchers?
2s and 3s.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, Paul has also put up the KennewickHousingAuthority.org website there. If people would like to go take that, that's listed in the chat box as well. So if there are no other questions, I want to remind you next month, December 17th, again at 7 o'clock, would be what would normally be our annual Christmas party, unfortunately, which has been canceled this year. So we will do the Zoom meeting as well. Our lobbyist and attorney Chet Baldwin will be joining us, and he will be giving us kind of a summary of the year and what the legislative outlook will look like going into 2021 when the next legislative session takes place, begins in January. So please join us for that. We will also be kind of a modified version of swearing in our new board members. So please join us for that. We will be replacing our secretary and our treasurer. And with that, I think that's it. I would once again like to thank Paul for hosting the meeting and Lona and Amanda for being our speakers. That was a very appropriate and educational seminar. And in this day and age, you might want to go with the guaranteed funding from the government for tenants if you are experiencing tenants who are not paying right now. So thank you all for joining us, and you have a good evening.